I'm Council President Shannon Hardin, chair of this committee, and I want to thank my colleagues, Councilmember Beatty, Councilmember Green, and Councilmember Remy for joining us as well. I know that Councilmember Bankston is trying to join us online, um, uh, but we'll see if he's able to engage. I will say on the onset, if the hearing goes a little long, today is my day for pickup for daycare, so I will be leaving around 5-ish, 5:10. But I think that we have a healthy conversation and a few folks who are going to speak on today's hearing, and we might actually probably will be done around then anyways. But if not, my very, very capable co-chair, Councilmember Green, will close us out. So I'm excited about this hearing today because we're talking about two important aspects of our housing landscape. First, housing supply and tenant stability. We are debunking the false choice between focusing on one over the other, because the truth is that we need both. Our community needs to make big investments in our housing supply, invest in affordable housing, and provide access to home ownership. We also need to make sure tenants have protections as consumers and receive fair treatment. So I'm looking forward to hearing from the Department of Development about the housing investments our city has made over the past 5 years through our voted city bond package and the federal funds, including COVID relief dollars. These funds were critical in helping Columbus scale up our development of affordable housing and keeping tenants in their homes. Last month, Mayor Ginther announced at his State of the City a proposed housing stability division created in the Department of Development. This division would institutionalize many of the protections City Council championed over the past 5 years under its Housing for All agenda. This includes source of income protection, access to counsel at eviction court, prohibitions of retaliatory evictions, and more. The streamlining of this tenant protections builds on what former council member Shayla Favor built and will help families in Columbus for years to come. Now, Prosecutor Favor provided critical leadership in this area of tenant protections, and she advocated for a fair housing division for many years. The seeds that she sowed over the past 5 years are now yielding its fruit, and I certainly want to thank her leadership. I want to also thank the administration and of Mayor Ginther, Director Stevens, and all those who got us to where we are today. We must now build on all of this progress, and some of the progress we didn't see come due to the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic, which demonstrated the vulnerabilities in our rental market for both tenants and landlords. One important aspect I don't want to forget, folks to forget, is that our small landlords are often small business owners as well, and entrepreneurs. So advances in emergency rental assistance helped those small business owners bridge the pandemic turmoil in their businesses, and they kept rental units online and affordable. But finally, I also want to highlight the historic investment our city is making on the supply of affordable housing. The mayor also announced a proposed $500 million investment in affordable housing. I hope we hear today about how prior housing bond dollars were invested and how we can double down on what is working, how we can integrate innovative housing strategies from around the country to tackle our housing crisis, and how we can be strategic in our investments in transit-oriented development alongside the large investments through the Link Us initiative and Zone In. So again, I want to thank you all for being here today. We have done a lot when it comes to housing. This council believes, one, in a housing for all agenda, but we also believe that housing is top 1, 2, and 3 top priorities for this region over the next decade. We will sink or swim based on the amount of housing that we build in Central Ohio. And as we think about displacement, as we think about affordability in general, it will come down to if we were bold enough in this period of time to do what we needed to do to build the housing that will incorporate the hundreds of thousands of folks that will call Columbus home in the next decade or so. And so I'm going to hand it over to the folks who are literally entrusted in building that housing or shaping those policies. I make this joke that it's the administration side to do the really hard work of making sure we meet all of these milestones. Council's job is just to bring in big ideas and welcome more conversation to it and put a spotlight on it. And I think it's that yin and yang together of the policy, but also the conversations and looking around the country and the innovation that will help us meet the mark. But I would like to turn it over to Melissa. Chair Green, do you have any additional comments? If not, then I will turn it over to Deputy Director Hannah Jones for comments.
Actually, we're going to switch it up a little bit.
Just
Deputy
joking.
Director Prosser is going to kick it off.
That works for me too.
And get started. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council President Hardin, members of Council. We appreciate the opportunity to come before you to discuss both the impacts of the affordable housing bond dollars on the city of Columbus as they've been deployed over the last 5 years to meet the goals of the housing strategy, but also to talk about the challenges we're seeing in the housing market today and how that will help us inform the use of the proposed 2025 housing bond, affordable housing bond as well. In addition, we're excited to share more information about the proposed Division of Housing Stability and how they will work with families and individuals in our community who are experiencing the impacts of the housing market. In the next few years, we will need to be working to fix the broader system so that we have an affordable, healthy housing market that serves all our families well. And we will simultaneously need to address the challenges facing our families today. Deputy Director Hannah Jones and I will look forward to the conversation this evening. So to get started, I think I get a question I assume that the council members get on a regular basis as well, and that is, what do you mean by affordable housing? For all of us, that is a deeply personal question. We know that as practitioners, when you are paying, your family is paying more than 30% of their income on their housing, they are compromising other things. At 30%, you start to compromise on maybe high-quality childcare, reliable transportation, some of the other needs your families have. Families paying more than 50% compromise on things like food and medicine. So I know the threshold for when things become unaffordable, but for affordable housing, what we really need is a lot of choice for families. When I talk about that 30% number, occasionally I get folks who just graduated from college who tell me that's a ridiculous amount to spend on their housing because they have a pretty substantial student loan bill. I have other families that may have multiple children in childcare, and they think that is not an affordable amount that they could pay. That's why as we think about housing affordability, that's really the critical issue for us in Central Ohio. There is not a sweet spot for any of us across the board. It really is dependent on where you are with your family. And we want to make sure that we return to what Central Ohio enjoyed for a long time, which was a naturally healthy and affordable housing market. Lots of choices, lots of options, and lots of stability for families either renting or owning in our community. So how do we return to that affordability regionally for our housing? There are three primary ways that we'll get back to that affordability. As Council President mentioned, the supply is really critical, and we're working together with City Council to do big things like modernize our zoning code. How do we streamline our permitting processes to drop the amount of time you spend getting housing projects approved? These are all things that we continue to work on in order to boost that supply so we can have enough housing in our region so that folks have choices and they can make the choice that makes the most sense for their families. Design is the second way we achieve affordability, and I think we kind of know this naturally. I mean, as you look at the diversity of housing typologies, having options that are smaller as you're a student is really helpful because it can be more affordable to you, but it can also be something that as you look at what makes sense for your family and how to look at potential for more density and more dense projects that can bring that affordability. But what we're here to talk about tonight is affordability by subsidy. And that's really where tools like the Columbus Affordable Housing Bond Package and some other tools that we rely on allow us to deliver housing that is affordable. And when I talk about affordability moving forward, I'm going to be talking about what some of us call the big A affordability, which means it's income restricted and protected housing. So it comes with compliance, it comes with assignment of those units, not just for the less expensive price, but to households earning those income levels. So that's really where we invest our bond dollars pretty significantly. And so how exactly do we invest in that affordable housing? I have a diagram here that shows broadly how you would do a capital stack, as we refer to it, for a permanent supportive housing project. This housing would serve our most vulnerable, those earning less than 30% of area median income. On the far left, you see the cost of the construction, and it's everything from land to construction costs and including soft costs. I think we've had a lot of conversations in these chambers about the fact that affordable housing is no less expensive to build and oftentimes more expensive to build. And so those costs, the land costs, all of the other construction costs are subject to these changes we've seen nationally in the marketplace that is adding to that cost of construction. In addition, you see in the red diagram in the middle, not only do you have that cost of construction that you need to account for, but you also have operating costs that are on top of that. So that is something else you have to manage as you've got that building going. So while we can assume some amount of debt, as you can see on the right-hand side, that debt is covered by the rents that are affordable for those earning less than 30% of the area median income. So again, relatively low rents to really offset the very small amount of debt that the project would have to take on, because the bulk of that construction cost is covered by two primary sources that we see, and that is either low-income housing tax credits, either the 9% or 4%, which just connotes the value of the tax incentive, and then also the competitiveness with which it takes to get it. And then we often find that even with those low-income housing tax credits, lately especially, we're seeing increasing and significant gaps that are still holding projects back from moving forward. And so we are able to utilize our affordable housing bond dollars to fill that final gap. And so what you see is on the permanent supportive housing project, you would have a small amount of debt that would be captured by those rents, and then you would also have an additional rent subsidy that would help cover those operating costs, and that's how you get an affordable project. This is probably the most challenging to develop in the affordable housing realm, but you'll see as we invest these bond dollars, we're also looking at ways we can use that to fill the gap on home ownership and some of the other priorities we have as well. And so as everyone's aware, in 2019, the City of Columbus went to the voters and asked them for approval for the first time to allocate $50 million for affordable housing in the bond package. Bond packages have historically gone for things that are more traditional infrastructure around utilities and roadways. This was the first time we really asked our community to consider affordable housing part of that infrastructure. Based on the impact of the 2019 affordable housing bonds, City of Columbus went back to the voters in 2022 and asked again if this was still something that was a priority and something that the community would like to see us include in that infrastructure. And again, the answer was yes. And so between those two bonds, we had $250 million of city bond authority. And I think that's always the critical part, which we'll talk a little bit more about today. There is not a big check that gets delivered for the $250 million. It is something that we continue to work with the auditor's office and other folks in the city to be able to allocate those bond dollars and get access to them. So in terms of the 2022 bond dollars, we've typically asked and so far been successful at securing the bonds at about $50 million a year. So we continue to plan out for that. Things change in our financial markets and we continue to watch those, but that's certainly how we plan. And so as of today, we've deployed $141 million of those affordable housing bonds. They cut across 39 separate projects. Again, all affordable with income restricted and protected units that we are able to assign to those families in those income brackets. That gets us about little over 4,200 affordable units. All of these units are below 80%, are available to those earning below 80% of our area median income, largely averaging out around 60% of the area median income aligned with our LIHTC projects. And then included in those 4,200 units are 523 units of permanent supportive housing, which, like the diagram showed before, is something that is accessible to our most vulnerable. Finally, we had $31 million deployed to date to support affordable home ownership. So these are with important partners like this Central Ohio Community Land Trust, our partners at Habitat for Humanity, and others that help us deliver affordable home ownership options to our community. However, in addition to making sure that we have new places for folks to call home and building new construction, we also think it's deeply important to utilize the bond dollars to support our most vulnerable homeowners throughout our neighborhoods. These folks are at great risk for displacement. They are living in what is naturally occurring affordability, but the house may not be in a state that is a livable and stable place for them. And so the bond dollars are really a big opportunity for us to engage with those families and make sure we can stabilize them, not just keep them housed, but make sure their house is sufficient and healthy and safe for them to continue to live in. So we do deploy the bond dollars across the city, impacting more than 600 families to be able to stabilize them and displacing in areas where we're seeing displacement. And I'm going to hand it over to Deputy Director Jones now to talk a little bit about, in addition to the bond dollars, which have a role to play but have some restrictions on how we can use them, how we've supported programmatically the families that are experiencing the impacts of our housing constrained market today.
Thank you, Deputy Director. Over the last several years, we've been able to invest over $98 million in rental assistance and housing stability services. This has allowed us to build capacity and an infrastructure through the Central Ohio Stable Housing Network, showing the value of targeted rental assistance as a critical intervention in our community. It has also allowed us to deploy housing resource specialists to families throughout our county to assist with housing crisis navigation. However, these are not resources that are sustainable at the current levels. A similar program would require $15 million annually in rental assistance alone. Thus, it is critical that we utilize other policies and tools to provide additional interventions for those who find themselves in a precarious housing situation. Over the previous year, we have created both the tenant relocation and access to council codes in partnership with City Council. Both are examples of policy interventions that can work to deter problematic behavior while reserving limited local resources for the most critical interventions. Since being implemented, 433 notices have been issued informing landlords of their responsibility to provide assistance. While it's still early in the implementation and thus hard to prove a negative, we have received feedback from our colleagues that this new requirement has served as an incentive for owners to make necessary repairs and prevent unnecessary displacements. With the implementation of the Access to Council legislation, it is estimated that the city will save $4 for every dollar invested in the services to our most vulnerable households. That means that the $1.4 million committed by this council earlier this month will provide a cost savings of approximately $5.6 million in social service responses. These are just a few examples of how we're working to assist those who are caught in a housing crisis today, while also utilizing bond dollars to plan for the housing supply needs of the future.
And as we look forward to the 2025 bond package, we are keeping an eye on several things that are occurring in our housing market in addition to the constraints that we have been with us for a number of years. The first one is interest rates, and I think we've lived with the higher interest rates for a couple of years now, but it does impact two really critical issues. One, it's impacting our home ownership, right? We have people who are staying in their homes. We certainly have higher monthly mortgages as a result of those interest rates. It's upsetting a little bit of that natural churn that we would see when people taking the opportunity to move to a bigger or smaller house. A lot of folks are stuck a little bit based on the interest rate that they may have gotten a few years ago. And for those who are getting mortgages today, it's just increasing that monthly cost for them. But secondly, it impacts that rental project, right? So our developers also have to go to the bank to get a loan. It's not just those of us who are getting a mortgage. They have to go to that bank, and I was looking back, in 2021, the interest rates were about 3.15%. By 2025, and now we're at about 4.5% for loaning on that capital. So that would be a difference of just about $2 million on a project that was $15 million total, just the increase in that interest rate. So as we think about how do we deliver affordability, all of that $2 million has to get captured somewhere in that revenue, just like I showed in the diagram before. And so we're really trying to overcome a pretty significant cost of capital that's facing our housing construction as well. There are also some additional programmatic things that are adding costs, especially to our affordable housing projects. We have Build America, Buy America now, which has increased projects cost by 4 to 5% across the board. So on that same $15 million project, you'd add another $750 million or $750,000, sorry, to that project. So these are two examples of ways that housing construction is getting more expensive, and without the opportunity to include our housing bond dollars, all of those costs get passed on to the tenant or the owner of the property. In addition, we see more conservative lending practices. We see challenges with construction financing and being able to secure loans from banks to get those projects underway. Certainly, as we are responding with the Division of Housing Stability, we have an increasing instances of exploitation of our tenants. So a lot of times when we think about the housing crisis, we talk a lot about increasing rents and increasing home prices, which are both deeply impactful. But because we have such a constrained market, a decade ago or 15 years ago in Central Ohio, if tenants had a bad landlord, they could make a different decision. They had other options in our city to move their family to a safer, more stable unit. What we find now is the constrained market not only drives prices, but limits the ability for those most vulnerable to find adequate, safe, and stable housing, because those units are able to be highly selective. And so anyone with anything on their record that may make them a less than attractive tenant is going to find themselves in a position where they are not in the most safe and stable housing they can locate. And I think that's something we have to, as we think about the Division of Housing Stability, that's something that is with us in Central Ohio in a way that it hasn't been in the past. We continue to struggle a little bit with property management infrastructure. We continue to build the units and have those units available, but we need to figure out how we scale up that property management infrastructure as well. And keeping in line with the amount of housing construction we do. And then our aging housing stock, about 50% of the housing in Central Ohio, just in the city of Columbus, was built before 1960. So as we think about the work that our team does with home repair and the investment you saw in those low-income homeowners, we expect and anticipate that those issues will continue given the aging housing stock that we have in the city. But finally, as we wrap up, as we head into the summer and thinking about the 2025 bond package, understanding where our challenges are with our housing market, understanding the ways that bond dollars can be utilized in projects, we'll continue to look at how does it add to that affordability, but also preserve and support our existing residents as well. We'll continue to look at our permitting timelines and how we're engaging with our developers to make sure we're getting projects across the finish line as fast as possible. We continue with the zoning code modernization work. And then we will continue to support those vulnerable families and really understanding how best we can engage with them, which is why I will hand it back over to Deputy Director Jones to talk a little bit more about how we're going to work with the Division of Housing Stability.
Can I call audible directors? And I just wanted to maybe open it up for questions from my colleagues just on what we've done so far, because I think that we want to really put a focus on how the past bond dollars have been used, celebrate the wins. I mean, I don't think that we should zoom past that. Over the last several years, we've been able to build 4,200 units with the support of our first $250 million in bonds. Could you first remind me, Prosser, Director Prosser, what are the three buckets again that we are using to direct our housing policy?
Certainly. So we have, are you speaking specifically to the housing strategy? Or
Yeah.
Oh, yes. So the primary one being build, right? We need to have enough housing in our community. We also need to invest in affordability, which is really where these housing bond dollars exist. We also want to make sure that we're preserving, right? We're looking towards where those impacts of displacement, how do we support our homeowners in our neighborhoods? And then finally, making sure that as we develop and execute these policies, that they are inclusive, that we're making sure that there's economic diversity in our neighborhoods and opportunities for everyone to decide what makes sense for their family, regardless of what they do for a living in our community.
I think I asked this in one of our private meetings. As you look over the strategy, is one more important than the other? Like, as we think about how to send forth limited resources, how do we think about where the administration puts its focus as we think about even our community partners who are doing this work?
For me, housing is one of the most unique parts of this sector of the broader economy, in that we have a role to play as the public sector, but we also have incredible private sector partners. Where 99% of our housing in the U.S. and certainly in Central Ohio is built by the private sector. And so our ability to connect with those folks and ensure that they can get the housing developed throughout our community at all different price points and all different types and styles That's a really big, significant lift to getting the overall housing market back to being healthy and affordable. We know that there are families that for whom the market will never deliver affordable housing, right? They will not make enough to be able to overcome the cost of construction, and that's really the role of the city, to be engaged in that space. And the harder that we make it broadly across the housing market to find naturally occurring affordable housing delivered by the marketplace, the more we are going to have to show up in the space. And so one of the things I talk about is we can't subsidize our way out of this problem. I really want those subsidies and the investments that we make to support our most vulnerable, those that really won't be served by the market, and allowing us to work with our private sector partners to develop the rest of the housing that we need. And it's really the complement of those two that makes it a really unique thing, in that we can truly work together to figure out how to return that healthy, affordable housing market, while also making sure that we, as the public sector, are really supporting those folks that the market's not going to support naturally.
And just to continue to educate council and the public on how we draw down on the bond dollars, you were explaining to us how just because we have the ability, we have the voted capacity to have 250 million, each year we have to work with the auditor to see about how much we can actually put to market. Could you explain like what makes it easy, more or less, like that we could get more or less working with the auditor, and then just highlight again for the public how much we have left, either in capacity or left to spend down. This is all, again, a precursor to the conversation about what we're asking the public to do later this year.
Yes, I think one of the unique parts of using affordable housing bond dollars to develop affordable housing is these projects do take quite a big amount of time. And so we have constructed quite a sophisticated waterfall that is in real time showing how we are, assuming we are able to sell $50 million a year to support affordable housing. Here is the pipeline of how those dollars would get executed based on the projects that are either being supported by low-income housing tax credits or some of the other opportunities that we have. And so while we are able to time out those dollars so that we're prepared at closing for the projects that we've committed to through that $50 million of bond sale a year that we expect, understanding that we continue to work in a changing landscape. And it really is based on what we are able to, and this is, the auditor determines how much capacity we have based on the revenue that we can put forward to support that. And so it's really about making sure that those things are in balance. Also understanding we have lots of priorities in the city of Columbus, and we continue to sell bonds for roadways and utility infrastructure improvements, which I know you guys have heard from a lot of community members, how are we coupling these two things together? And I think the bond sale is a really good example of making sure that we are doing all of those different pieces in real time so that we are complementing not just building the housing, but making sure that the infrastructure itself can sustain all the new housing that we're building. And so those competing factors all come down to whether or not the auditor continues to be supportive every year of that bond sale. And so I think that's part of what is the challenge of deploying these dollars, in that we have authority for $250 million. We have incredible partners in this community who are showing up with projects ready to go. So we are able then we typically have two application processes, one in the spring and one in the fall, which allows us to sort of understand what projects are in the pipeline, where are they in their timing, and how can we allocate them appropriately across time.
Thank you. Do my colleagues have any questions about what we've been presented so far before we get into housing stability and the bond package? Councilmember?
Yes. So my question is, I'm going back to your slide about the 99, the 2022 packages and the results and the outcome. Is there a report or document out there that shows each individual project, dollar amounts, outcome, address of where all those projects are located across the city? Is there a report that's readily available, or would that need to be prepared?
Nope, it is something that we can provide back to council, is just the list of projects and where we are, whether or not they've been committed to, allocated, or constructed. We can share that back. It's something that we've shared regularly with the media as well. So there is a document that we can share with you exactly where those dollars went.
Okay. And I know that you mentioned in your last comments about a spring application period in a fall or something like that. Has the administration, are there any overall goals other than these broad buckets? So let's just, if we were bearing down just on build, is there any thinking that, we want this many at 40 AMI or 30 AMI, we want this many in the west side of town, this many in the north side of town, any type of, I'll call them opportunity goals, or anything like that that you're developing at this time, goals for how this money would be distributed?
So as we look at where we deploy our housing bond dollars, they would be in projects that are for families earning less than 80% of the area median income. Most of them are also coupled with low-income housing tax credit, which will have the project averaging out at 60% of area median income. And as we look at those opportunities for how do we want to make sure that we have inclusive housing. We want to make sure that these projects get built in areas that are opportunity rich. However, when we couple them with the low-income housing tax credits, we start to see some other criteria come in, right? So the Ohio Housing Finance Agency every couple years issues their qualified allocation plan, which has a very clear idea of where they would like housing to get built in the different cities throughout Ohio. And so as the affordable housing developers navigate that space of identifying a site that scores well, as by the time they get to us, they have kind of fit that criteria of the low-income housing tax credits. And then it's our job to make sure that we fill that final gap, get that project across the finish line. It is something that's important to us not to add a lot of extra additional criteria because the projects are so hard to cite today, given all the constraints. I mean, anybody out looking for land right now knows it's how competitive it is. If you look at where the Ohio Housing Finance Agency has really highlighted where they would like their dollars to go, it's in very specific areas that makes it challenging to find lots of different sites. And so we have the overarching goal of making sure that we have economic inclusivity throughout our city, but we are responding in a space where there's a lot of other funding sources that are also adding criteria to those projects. So in a lot of ways, once they get a site and they can bring us affordability, that really meets the needs that we have.
Okay, it seems that you're very zeroed in on the LIHTC projects, which obviously speak to the deepest level of affordability. So in this first group, the previous bond package, I mean, did that make up 50% of those dollars that were, or 60%, or would you have to just get back to us on that?
I think we'd have to get back to you on that one.
Okay.
I think it is certainly a good portion because it does allow us to stretch our dollars much further by
Okay.
coupling it with those other
And so
funding
this
sources.
particular process, was that just for those type of projects, or when there were others who may have been doing single-family homes or workforce housing, which did not fall into the LIHTC or OFA guidelines or anything like that, was that a separate process, or did that just kind of fall out?
So we do have different partners based on the type of product that they're going to bring. So certainly for our affordable home ownership, we have a couple partners that do that work really, really well for us. Habitat for Humanity, the Central Ohio Community Land Trust. And those were opportunities to work with them to identify the funding they needed to do pretty good investment in affordable home ownership. We have seen a lot of partners that can utilize the low-income housing tax credits, bring those properties to bear. But we do have examples of folks that have delivered on affordability that have not utilized the low-income housing tax credit projects. And we're starting to explore that process and how would we really look at those projects individually.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, what I'm getting at, and this is just feedback from different members of the community, probably that are not well informed or otherwise. It seemed as though, you read in the paper, 200 million bond package and everything like that, but there's no really direction as to, and maybe there's an internal direction, but to the external public, how would I try to pursue those dollars? Would I even be eligible? What type of projects it's for, et cetera? We see the end outcome, and they're all very good outcomes. And so when I'm looking towards the next, I'll call the next tranche, is there a way that there could be something that's a little bit more programmatic?
So if I could add one more thing, Councilmember.
Yes, please.
The other thing, we have had years that are just independent bond rounds. What occurred over this last couple of years also is that the state put forward their
Yes.
own tax credit. And so that also presented us with a unique opportunity to leverage more LIHTC projects than maybe necessarily in previous years would have occurred. So that nomenclature sticks out a little bit because over the last 2 years, we haven't just had the federal, we've also had the state tax credits that we've taken advantage of as well. I think that one of the goals over the summer here is to dive into a lot of the data and learn what we have from this last round to inform, just as you're asking, what does that 500 million look like? Where do we lean in even harder than we are? And what makes the most sense to capture those that the market is not perhaps capturing now?
Okay, I will hold off right now until I hear more.
Well, thank you, Councilmember, and thank you, Director. I just want to put a fine point on it because, again, I think that it's really important that we understand what we were able to do with the first 250 million. So I think I heard 600 families stabilized, $31 million put out in our community for home ownership, and a little over 4,200 units supported with the current dollars. I think that is something that, as we think about putting a dent in our challenge, has to be acknowledged, celebrated, and used as some type of a guide for where we go from here. But now I know you have more good that is coming to be presented in our new housing stability unit. So I'll turn it back over to you, directors.
Thank you, President Hardin, members of council. The creation of this division acknowledges the work of a team that's been operating within our director's office to strengthen both the preserve and include pillars of the housing strategy. I think one of the things that Deputy Director Prosser pointed out is that we really want to create an equitable environment where everybody has access to opportunity, has access to choosing the housing that they want to live in. And in order to do that, we have to build, we have to preserve, but we also have to ensure that those who might not be able to have a voice or don't have an opportunity to access other resources get to be a part of that narrative as well. And that's really the goal of this division, to enhance tenant protections and create a more equitable housing landscape in Columbus. By creating the division, we are hardwiring the programs and initiatives in the department to ensure that the housing strategy continues to address the housing needs of the future, as well as the challenges our residents face today. So back to the accomplishments that we did over the past 5 years in housing stability, a lot of that was compelled by having access to federal resources, but it gave us an opportunity to bring a lot of people to the table to say, how do we do this more thoughtfully? How do we work with council to put forward protections? And then how do we work with departments to ensure that those protections are enforced, that they serve a purpose, that tenants know they exist, that landlords know what their responsibilities are. The division will engage with individuals who are facing displacement across the housing continuum, from those who are unsheltered to those who are being exploited by the limited housing supply and face rising rents, evictions, and the choice to remain in an unsafe home or no home at all. So I want to be clear that while in the beginning, as we establish this, it's really to collaborate and create an efficient system for what already exists. I think we have to recognize that displacement occurs across the continuum, and we need to lean in on homelessness. We need to lean in on housing stability, which also means economic stability. The Human Services team is part of this, and that is because providing a living wage and ensuring that people can access resources in order to remain stably housed and give their families opportunity is part of that conversation of housing stability and aligns with ensuring that the housing strategy is successful long-term. So our goal is to assist families navigating a housing crisis in order to prevent housing instability and homelessness, as I mentioned. Our goal is to strengthen upstream interventions to prevent displacement, to ensure that we're communicating with tenants and landlords, and then to bolster the creativity between departments and better engage with individuals who are on the land in order to work with them in order to secure a safer housing option. While the process to formally create the division is just beginning once you guys pass the code change, the work is already underway, and we'll continue to move forward with our existing staff. We'll be coming up on 1 year of the Tenant Relocation Assistance Code, and it is our goal to come with a recommendation in the fall to you guys about how to fine-tune that, make it better, make it more responsive based on what we've learned. We also will be implementing access to counsel, so having that first year of experience with legal aid and our partners at Eviction Court, the Women's Commission, and others to figure out how best to serve those families, to build on that, and to better understand what it looks like to support that work moving forward. We anticipate hiring an administrator in July of this year, and then would hope to fill the remaining positions by the fourth quarter of this year. So hopefully we will have the division fully staffed moving into 2026. But again, we will not be waiting for that in order to start the work before us. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yes, so let's go back to the pandemic, where the city approved a great deal of rent assistance. It seemed as though the lion's share of that work was outsourced to the nonprofit community, your impacts, your urban leagues, et cetera. Would you see the office doing that, or you're trying to build up your own system to do it in-house?
If somebody's got $15 million a year to give me, I would love to do it in-house. But I think that the answer to that, sir, is that we would continue to work with our partners. I don't see any world where we would be bringing all of the work in-house. I think one of the most dramatic things that we've been able to accomplish with the Homelessness Prevention Network is embedding individuals and organizations who are already trusted partners in our community. And so any long-term rental assistance that we would be able to stand up as a local initiative, we would still see all of our community partners as a critical component to making that work successful.
I would caution you to, everything was done so quickly during the pandemic, and, some organizations performed well and other organizations didn't perform not so well. Mm-hmm. And so, I hope that you will be returning to interface with others to evaluate which of those organizations are most effective, both from a execution standpoint, but also a trust standpoint.
I couldn't agree more with you on that. I think one of the very early lessons we heard loud and clear was the challenge of maybe only having 1 or 2 partners. We currently have about 28 partners who are access points, who have the ability to help us intake and evaluate individuals for access to assistance. And then the one thing that we have centralized is the back of the house operations. So we have one organization that processes eligibility, and then we have one organization that makes the payments. And those are completely separate. So the front of the house, the people engaging with the tenants and those in need are the people who know how to do that work. The people who know how to do the administrative side, that is all that they do. And that has really helped us be able to get payments in a timely manner, which is very important to both your concerns and the president's, that our property managers and owners are small businesses as well. So waiting on payments for months at a time is not acceptable at all. So yes, we have tried to be as responsive as we can and would hope to continue to refine that moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Councilmembers. We are excited. I think we bring forward the code change for the division this Monday, coming Monday. So we look forward to hearing that piece of legislation. Are there any other questions around the Housing Stability Unit? Big deal. Thank you for the collaboration and partnership, and we look forward to supporting. And a reminder that even just for the access to capital, for every $1 that we put out there, it saves our community for other dollars that it would take to take care of a person who was put out. So thank you. Turn it back over.
I think we're wrapped up with the presentation side. As we think about the 4,200 units that we brought on, just for the sake of order of magnitude, as we think about the impact to the community, those were units that were built over the last 5 years. In that same time period, the total number of units built in the city of Columbus was about 29,000. So to have the 4,200 that are all income restricted and protected affordability is extremely remarkable. even given across larger cities, to have that percentage of our units coming in as affordable is really remarkable. So just from the order of magnitude standpoint, 4,200 always seems like such a small amount to the challenge that we're facing, but it is really remarkable given the context that we have against the broader housing production. So appreciate again the opportunity and the ability to highlight, I think, the work that Deputy Director Jones and I do to complement each other around the systems level work and making sure that we're restoring the affordable housing in our community, but also making sure that we're responding to where families are and the needs they have today. So we're walking and chewing gum, right? We get to do the kind of large systems level work, but also make sure we're supporting families in the meantime.
Thank you. Now, are we going to hear more about the proposed 2025 affordable housing bond?
As we look forward to this summer and working with council and understanding what those challenges are, we'll be meeting with partners, folks out in the community, developers, really trying to identify what are the needs that the housing market's facing. As I mentioned, there's some things that are coming our way that we haven't seen as we prescribed the 2022 bond. So we want to respond in real time as we have challenges that we're facing in order to get more of that unit production. I think we'll be interested in thinking about housing diversity and really how do we start to incent the ability to bring different types of housing, family-sized units down to smaller, more adaptable units, and how we actually engage in that space. So we look forward as we go through the summer, working with our partners and the community members to set what that framework looks like, and we'll continue to work with council as well.
Thank you. Is it fair that since this second package is double the size of the first, that we think that we would say double the amount of units that would be dispersed or put out into the market? Is that, and I guess maybe I should back up. First question is, as we think about this next bond package, do you see the administration shaping those around the same type of buckets that informed the first package?
So a couple of things, one, as we look at, kind of doubling the size of the resources that we bring to bear, it doesn't mean that the other resources get doubled as well. So that is something that, but as we look at that landscape, it allows us to look at some more opportunities where even though $250 million is quite extraordinary, it is limited once you get into these bigger projects, and we're able to support the LIHTC. Again, but LIHTC itself won't double, right? We won't have access to twice as many of those resources. So the opportunity to utilize some of our bond dollars for other types of projects is an opportunity that we have. We also know that costs keep increasing, and it keeps getting more and more challenging. So we have a number of projects that, had an identified budget and everything seemed good, and then you fast forward a couple of months and the construction prices have changed dramatically. They've kicked into Build America, Buy America. Some of these other factors, their capital interest rates have gotten more expensive. These things all happen in real time, and we see it getting more expensive, and so our dollars will need to go further. And I think that's the opportunity with the $500 million, is both the ability to respond to a changing marketplace and one that's getting more expensive, especially to deliver affordable housing, but also the opportunity to think about some of these other ways that we can invest in housing outside of the very traditional low-income housing tax credit projects.
Thank you. As we think about how just different uses for the funds, can you talk to us about permanent supportive housing, and is that a possibility, or do we see that as part of how we will expend some of these dollars and create partnerships?
Yes, I think that is really the most challenging housing to bring to the market. It is it is more expensive, and it is going to have the least amount of revenue from the rents, just based on where the residents are on the income continuum. And so as we look at those projects, our bond dollars become quite important. There is some amount of work that our team is doing around how best to include our bond dollars in those projects. Mm-hmm. There is some challenges around their eligible basis and making sure that we're not creating additional problems for those projects. And so our team is diving deep to understand how can we use our bond dollars to get those projects supported in a way that doesn't end up creating more challenges for them on the back end. So it is the most difficult and challenging to bring. but a deep priority for us to make sure that we have housing for those either exiting homelessness or those that need that additional support to remain stably housed.
And the last thing I would add to that, and kind of to your previous question, President, is also the uncertainty on the federal level really is very clear when you look at permanent supportive housing. It requires operational support. And so, and also for all of these projects, the importance of vouchers and the engagement of the Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority. So while there is an opportunity to do more at the same time, if we continue to see the success of skinnier budgets at a federal level, it's going to be really hard to create a product that can then be operational and doesn't end up becoming just another market rate project.
Building on that, I'm thinking, because I see some of our friends back from Community Shelter Board, as we think about the system in terms of housing, and how do we see the bond dollars, or do we, and maybe supporting upkeep or of shelters or some of the physical assets that we have right now that keep people sheltered? Will we see that at all? Is that part of a conversation as we think about the bond dollars that are going out?
Yeah, absolutely. So for a very long time, the administration has provided approximately $350,000 per year for what we call emergency shelter repairs. Really those smaller items that help a shelter upgrade, refrigerators, security systems, lighting, all of those types of things. With the 2022 bond package, we increased that to $500,000, and many years we've done even more based on resources available. So with this new bond package, as we engage with our community partners, part of that will be what does it look like to increase access to those resources. I would also note that we have done a number of substantial capital investments. They just haven't been out of the affordable housing bond. So the mayor has supported, and the city council has supported Star House, Adam H., when Van Buren was built. A number of places where those are separate earmarks versus necessarily being a part of the affordable housing bond, but all critical. And then obviously, as we look not only at PSH, but what other transitional housing opportunities look like as we engage with more people on the land, what is the right way to deploy bond dollars to support the work of our shelter providers to provide safe sheltering options, either at Van Buren, any of our other shelters, or locations to be determined.
Thank you. And my last question on the bond, before I open up to my colleagues, is there a mechanism? How do we look around the country at our peer cities to think of innovation when it comes to how we can use municipal bonds? Is there a community that comes to mind that we think, hey, they're doing something outside of the box? And are we willing with this next package to do something we have not done in the last package as we think about our growing challenge around housing?
So yes, we do look across the landscape. There are maybe 14, 15 cities that are doing a similar activity that we're doing here with affordable housing bond dollars. So some of them, like Seattle's been in this business for quite a long time. They actually use a levy, but very similar deployment. To folks like Chicago that just approved theirs this past fall. So we have folks that are trying to think about how best do these bond dollars enter projects, how do we make sure we're leveraging them for as much outcome as we possibly can, and then how do we meet the needs of the families today given the incredible cost of construction and just the challenges that everyone's facing. As you look across the landscape, a lot of the bond packages are going to support those final gap funding in those low-income housing tax credit projects. That's kind of the bread and butter of the bond dollars, which makes sense. However, we're seeing some experimentation start to think about what are the innovations that we could utilize to meet some of the very specific needs. And I think as we identify what the challenges are that our developers are facing and our families are facing, we'll be able to see, are there ways to innovate in terms of how we utilize those bond dollars. And I know council is very well aware, I don't think either of us have said it thus far in this presentation, but one of the challenges with bond is they are for capital projects, right? So they are not things that we can use to support emergency rental assistance or to do ongoing rental subsidy for the folks that are most vulnerable. So it is a restricted type of investment that we get to make. I think we are open to being as creative as we can within those constraints. And I think that's the flexibility we're going to need over the next couple of years in responding to the changing not just Central Ohio landscape, but the context in the country as well. And so kind of watching what are not just the way that they're deploying their bond dollars, but what are the outcomes and what are they really seeing as the benefits for their community, and working together with those other cities to identify where those opportunities are.
I think this is also one of those where innovation is kind of a word for what looks boring on the outside. So it may still be financing a deal, but being creative about how to get it done. And I think, a great example of our Columbus Way is all the partners behind us who access the Affordable Housing Trust, the Finance Fund, the Finance Authority does projects. CMHA has just started doing their own bond issuance. And so those don't necessarily sound innovative on the outside, but they are different ways to figure out how to get a project across the finish line so that there are units that are open to the public.
Thank you. Do my colleagues have any questions on the forthcoming bond package?
Yeah, just look forward to working with you and, urging you to, come up with some type of opportunity goals, because it just seemed as though the current package, although the outcomes were good, it was much of a mystery to many in the public. And even many in the development community. It was a mystery, when, who do you go to, who do you call, what would it be, what would the qualifications be, et cetera. So on this next package, if it's feasible to have, some more goals, more transparent processes, that would be extremely helpful. I think that would sit better.
It's also been interesting, Councilmember, to look at how other cities communicate their bond packages and how they're tracking the progress. And I think those are things we're also looking at from the innovation standpoint. How can we be better at having real-time tracking and understanding where those bond dollars are going? Some good cities and some ones that aren't a little hard to understand. So, kind of learning from that as well, I think, from the other cities.
I mean, the fortunate thing that we do have here is that in our community, we have very capable partners across the whole continuum of housing, from the deepest affordability to permanent to homelessness to workforce. I mean, there's many, many parts that are home-based. So at least we're not having to recruit from the outside, and we are pouring dollars back into our community. And that's the one thing we should be definitely thankful and grateful of, that we've had so much developed talent here in our community.
Well, thank you again for this presentation. Council looks forward to our part in putting this package before voters. Is the administration looking for opportunities for how we can solicit feedback from the public pertaining to the bond package? I know that what I've been really appreciative of, Mayor Ginther and Director Stevens, is the willingness to work with council to make sure that it is our collective values and interests that are seen and articulated in how we put out the $500 million, bringing into things like the concepts that Councilmember Beatty just talked about, but also just making sure that we are being innovative. But how would we want to think about the public's engagement in the bond package as we go out and start to talk about this summer?
And I think this summer will be sort of that understanding what's challenging in our community, where the roadblocks that our folks are facing, how best could the bond package assist in getting projects done and getting really critical work given the current landscape. And so a lot of it will be that investigation period this summer. And really seeing, I know I've heard from some folks where construction financing is particularly challenging to get. Is there a way for us to look at ways for the bond package to help support getting folks just into the construction process? Those are all things that we'll be working with stakeholders and partners who are in the development community, but also making sure as we're working with those who serve the families that are impacted by the housing constraints, that we're also understanding where their pressure points are. What types of units are we lacking? What are the reasons they're not being delivered by the marketplace? Is the bond a way that we could help support the development of some of those other types of housing housing that we're not seeing the market naturally deliver? Those are questions we'll be working on all summer, and we look forward, of course, to working with council and understanding what you're hearing from your partners as well, and crafting what that framework looks like for the 2025 bond package, but reflecting back the marketplace that we have today. We're not going to take the framework that we put together in 2022 and simply move it forward. The housing market is perpetually changing. It is we have to be responsive, and we have to set up that framework in a way that meets the needs of the challenges that we're facing. So that's the work that will occur this summer. We're looking forward to it, and understanding what the impact of $500 million on affordable housing can be for our community.
Thank you. Well, like I said, council looks forward to be a partner with you, even in some external engagements, and how we bring together our constituents to have the conversation around how we could use those bond dollars. We will now move into the public testimony portion of tonight's public hearing. We have 4 speakers that have signed up to speak. The first speaker to come before council is no stranger to us, a leader and advocate in this space, Carly Booz from the Affordable Housing Alliance. Carly, welcome back to council.
Good evening, all. Thank you again. Council President Hardin, members of council, I am Carly Booz. I'm here representing the Affordable Housing Alliance of Central Ohio this evening. And as you mentioned, I've been fortunate to speak here before, but I do believe that the topic tonight is perhaps the most pressing and momentous occasion that we've had to share together. The bond package in particular is something that is incredibly needed in our community, and what you're doing here tonight matters a great deal, not just for the city, but for the region, and I would argue for the country as well. You're supporting a bold and forward-looking investment in affordable housing, one that complements and advances an ambitious and comprehensive community housing strategy that's using every tool at our reasonable disposal to be able to solve this challenge. And you're doing so in an era where local leadership and local innovation has been more important than ever. With half of all Columbus residents reporting that they have been personally impacted by our community's affordable housing shortage, this bond proposal will double those resources and leverage untold funds from both the public and private sectors. But I want to be clear, we're supportive and excited, not just because this is going to produce units or do deals or expand budgets, but this is about our people. It's about ensuring that every family, no matter their income or their job, can find and keep a place to call home in the city that they love, a city that has always strived to be America's opportunity city. This bond package has the power to create the breadth and the diversity of housing that our community needs, so that both teachers and their students can find stability, so that both caregivers and their families are not pushed out of our neighborhoods, and so that workers, entrepreneurs, and retirees alike can have a safe place to thrive. That's what makes our community strong. When we are stable but also welcoming, when we lead and are rooted in our relationships and our history, but are never afraid to chase progress either. It is this mission that affordable housing bonds have been proven to be both impactful and proven. Over the years, they have already built more than 4,000 homes in our community while helping us pioneer the best practices in this field nationwide. Among the lessons we have learned is that our bonds worked best and our investment goes the furthest when it is complemented by other housing tools. That's why parallel efforts that modernize our zoning rules, that embed housing stability and homelessness prevention at the root of all of our policies, and those that cultivate empowered home ownership is equally important for solving this challenge. By giving our voters the ability to approve this investment, Columbus is not just building our housing strength, it is rebuilding that foundation of a growing, transparent, and dynamic city that works for everyone. Because of this strategy, because of this investment, because of this inclusion, Columbus becomes more than a city solving its own challenges. It becomes a model for others, both within our region and at large. I want to thank you again for being champions of this work and for creating a model for the rest of the country to look to for both inspiration and innovation. I'm happy to answer questions, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Carly. Councilmember Beatty.
Yes, you recently issued your report, which had a lot of public feedback. Based on that public feedback, what are you hearing is the greatest need for affordable housing? At what level or what type of housing?
It's a good question. I don't have an easy answer. I think when you go out and you ask the public, what do you want? They say cheaper homes, less of a price tag, and a mortgage that I afford, a rent that is sustainable. When it gets into the nitty-gritty, the biggest second thing that I hear is more diversity. I want to be able to pick the kind of home that's right for my family. For some people, it's going to be a big home on 3 or 4 acres. It's going to have lots of grass. It's going to have lots of open space. For plenty of other people, it's something smaller, more compact. We have a real lack of starter homes that is incredibly challenging for our family. We have a lack of accessible housing for folks with disabilities and seniors who are trying to age in place. I apologize. I don't have something succinct, but it's diversity and affordability.
Thank you for being seriously a preeminent partner with us and helping to lead that conversation, to pull us all along, to make sure that we even have the vocabulary to how we talk about this changing housing market. Thank you. Thank you, Carly. Next speaker to come before council is Michael Wilkos, who I think is speaking in support or for the Community Shelter Board. Welcome back to council. Another advocate who is very familiar to us in this space.
Council President Hardin, members of council. My name is Michael Wilkos. I'm actually here wearing a couple hats. One, I work at United Way of Central Ohio, but I'm also currently the chair of the Continuum of Care, which serves with the Community Shelter Board in addressing our community's homelessness. There's a couple things I want to share with you tonight, things you already know, but I think are important for the record. But by way of background, I've now lived in Columbus for 37 years. I have served on 3 different commissions over that time period, and I have been a student and observer of the city's growth and change for a very, very long time. I've never been more optimistic and concerned about the current state of the housing market in Central Ohio, and I want to share with you some perspective on that. Homelessness is really a housing issue, and we have been chronically underbuilding housing for a very, very long time. Vacancies have dropped all across the city, but when you actually start to peel the layers of the onion a little bit, you'll start to see that rents have not been going up equitably across the entire community. As Carly just said, we're not building starter homes. We haven't been building starter apartments. And so rents are actually rising fastest in low-income neighborhoods, moderately so in moderate-income neighborhoods, but rents are going up the slowest in the wealthy neighborhoods where you see a lot of building, because as that building comes online, there's rent incentives. So when we think of places like Hamilton Road and Refugee, where nearly 9% of all people got evicted last year from just 2 apartment complexes, it also happens to be on the side of town where Kroger closed a grocery store, where Mid-Ohio Food Collective is reopening that. Poverty is moving away from the center of the city as people are avoiding the significant rent and housing cost increases in the urban core. Where are they headed? They're headed out to Northland, out to Refugee and Kimberly Parkway. They're heading further out west, and when they get to those destinations, they have a very, very difficult time supporting that move financially because of what's happening with housing costs. As recently as 2010, we had 107 housing units for every 100 households in our region. By 2020, we were down to just 102 for every 100 households. I think what happened in that decade was you take the order of the 2 words, affordable housing, which is this thing nobody really understands for someone over there in an income bracket I don't fully understand. Take that word affordable housing to housing affordability, and that's now impacting the entire city. So we've gone from 107 units to 100 households to 102. We're on track to only be at 96 housing units across our metropolitan region by the end of the decade. I don't think any of us have really seen a tight housing market just yet. I want to give an example of how the lack of housing has impacted one Columbus neighborhood of Linden. That neighborhood is now a growth neighborhood. It's a growth neighborhood for the first time in half a century, but in the last decade, the Linden neighborhood added 2,700 additional residents, but lost 4% of its housing stock, where there's 652 fewer housing units in that neighborhood, yet 2,764 people moved in. How does that happen? We either reuse the vacant and abandoned housing, which certainly happened across Linden, but what we're starting to see in all kinds of neighborhoods is more people living per unit because they simply cannot afford to live in other parts of the city. When we look at a map of where home and rent appreciation rates are increasing the fastest, there's a very clear pattern. It is black and brown neighborhoods. As the growth of the region's accelerated, as that growth has moved inward, as we've not built enough housing, where are those investors looking to pick up vacant lots and vacant homes? In some of our more marginalized communities. I'm enthusiastically in support of this $500 million bond package because I don't think there's anything more critical we could do right now for the long-term stability of our city. At United Way of Central Ohio, we're focused on one goal, success by third grade. The number one reason why kids are struggling is not because of what is or is not happening in the home or the classroom, but it often comes down to family and neighborhood stability. If a child is not stable in their housing, they're not going to be stable in the classroom, and that's going to interrupt their education. Last time the voters of this community were asked to support a housing bond package, it won by a 34-point spread. I think the people of our city are ready for action. They want to implement change, and that, I will add, comes in and alongside victory from the voters for Columbus City Schools, Columbus Library, CODA, Columbus State, and Children's Services. This is a city that is on an upward trajectory, and the citizens are looking for actionable steps to improve the future. I don't think a community can pass 6 levies out of 6 if you're not aspirational for the future, don't have confidence in the leadership of your community, and want the next generation to have a better city. And that is why this bond package is so important. Thank you. Any questions for me?
Sure.
Yes, Councilmember Green.
Mr. Wilkus, I just want to thank you for being here tonight. And I don't necessarily have a question, but I do just want to say, I don't know if any of our community leaders or our area commissioners are even going to watch this back, but I want to say for the record how grateful I am to have seen in that last 10 years that you referenced a really significant change in the mindset of the people of our community and how they are imagining and understanding what affordable housing is and what it means to all of us. And I want to give credit where credit is due because I think that shift is in large part because of advocates like you and because of Ms. Booth and because of everyone here who has been working so hard to help people unlearn things that they didn't even know they learned and better understand what it means when when we say the rising tide lifts all ships. And so it is both the opportunity we have ahead of us is exciting, and also it's a very nerve-wracking time because none of this stuff occurs in a vacuum. But I feel very confident knowing that we have so many committed, passionate people like you and everyone in this room where we're going to keep rowing this boat down the river together. So thank you.
I had reason to attend a session around ADUs, accessory dwelling units, at the Hilltop Library back in December. I just saw the posting earlier that day and said to a friend, let's go check this out. There were about 50 people that were there, and every single person who showed up was in support of accessory dwelling units. And I said to my friend, wow, I think something is really changing across our city, which are people are very actionable about tactical solutions, and things like this bond package provide that tactical, real-time, I want to find a solution, and this is one way that I can do it, not just for me, but for my entire community. So thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkos.
Thank you.
Keep preaching the gospel.
Thank you.
Keep
You know
preaching
I will.
the gospel,
Thank
brother.
you.
Next speaker to come before council is Kate Ames from Habitat for Humanity. Kate, welcome to council.
Good afternoon, Council President Hardin, other members of council. Thank you for hosting today's public hearing. Those are two very difficult people to follow, so right here. Habitat for Humanity Mid-Ohio is committed to helping solve the region's affordable housing crisis by repairing, building, and selling homes that are safe, decent, and affordable. The shortage of affordable housing can be illustrated in many ways. For example, in 2024, we received 298 completed applications for homeownership, up from 228 in 2023 and 78 in 2022. In 2 years, that is an increase of over 70%. Even with this growing demand, this fiscal year, we have built 13 homes, rehabbed 1, and are on track to repair over 100. We could and want to serve more, but are limited by funding, which is comprised of private funding, government dollars, and our own social enterprise. We are looking for innovative, affordable housing solutions, including multifamily home ownership, partnering with other affordable housing providers, and finding alternative construction methods. We all understand the urgency in our housing market across this price spectrum. I want you to know that Habitat is grateful for your support and leadership and stands ready to be a partner and leader in helping solve our most pressing issue, housing, especially affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councilmember, please.
One quick question. Thank you, Council President. I'm really interested and fascinated with this idea of the challenges related to construction costs and financing of construction projects. And I'm just curious from your perspective at Habitat, since that's a lot of what you do at a very affordable level, if you had a magic wand or could point to one solution to help mitigate those rising costs, what do you think it would be?
We saw through the COVID years, our construction costs increased by about 40%. Since then, they came down a little bit from those heights, but nothing has normalized to pre-COVID years. And I think we're at the point where no one expects that to happen. It's difficult to catch up with that from a funding perspective, and Habitat is a bit unique from other developers in that when we sell our homes, we hold the mortgage, so we don't receive that up front. So it's a little bit more of a hurdle for us. I wish I had a magic bullet for that. This investment is incredible. Having community support, having it be at the forefront of our leadership is important. It gets people's attention and it helps us have those conversations. As I said, we leverage the funds that we receive from the city with private dollars. So it helps us tell that story.
Could you, for the sake of the audience, could you walk through how a home is constructed by Habitat for Humanity? I mean, are there contractors and volunteers, that combination, and then what is the end result of what you're usually selling them for?
Yeah, of course. Our construction process is, again, a bit unique. Our homes are built with a combination of our staff leadership. So we do have construction leads on our staff. We have a full construction department. They lead teams of volunteers throughout the build, between 6 and 10 people each day. And then anything that is like our electrical work, our plumbing, that is done by subcontractors. At the end, our homes right now are appraising for around $200,000 on average. We have seen some random spikes in those appraised values, but we're kind of at that 200 average right now, and the vast majority of our homes are built in the Linton neighborhood.
And that $200,000, is that a set margin over cost that you're doing, or I'm sure you're not comparing it to the market, obviously, but how do you come up with that
we sell our
price?
homes for the appraised value, so that is what they are appraising for in the neighborhood. And then Habitat, because of our model, because we hold the mortgage, we're able to set the payments for our home buyers at an affordable rate of their monthly income.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you again for being one of those partners that we depend on to provide access in Columbus.
We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. And our final speaker this evening is Belinda Spinosi. Welcome to council.
Thank you for being able to speak before you. This is an honor, and I want to say, first of all, how proud I am of you for stepping up for people with disabilities in Columbus. It has been phenomenal, the walk that you've done with us. You've heard us, you've listened to us, and you helped us move forward. I cannot wait for you to meet our new CACD commissioners in 2 weeks. They're going to be right here before you. And it's a fine group of people. They're going to be great leaders in the future. My name is Belinda Spinosi. I am a disability advocate, and I am absolutely in support of Columbus's new division of housing stability. Thank you for this and for the director's work on this. They've also listened to me as well. We've had some really wonderful conversations, all of us, about this. My colleague, Christine Brown, that you normally see me with, could not be with us tonight, but I'm speaking on her behalf. Columbus has a great need for increasing the amount of accessible housing for people with disabilities. We are still deinstitutionalizing people. It's hard to believe in 2025 that we're still talking about this, as well as the number of veterans who are still looking for accessible housing, people who are homeless, people who are, you've already discussed here tonight, my fellow advocates have already discussed the number of people who are crowding in homes. We need to be a little more humane as a community. And we've done so much and we still have so much to go. We want to be here with you while we do this. I want to call back a report of yours. Columbus and Franklin County Joint Analysis of Impediments to Fair Housing Choice report. And in that, HUD took 148 complaints of fair housing in Columbus from January 2013 through July 2018. 78 of those were based on disability discrimination. Page 7 of that report reminded us that of our need for accessibility, housing accessibility requirements for fair housing. We ask for, Mr. President and council members, we ask for you to include in the new division of housing stability an accessible zoning code. We have not completed that yet. Christine and I tried to obtain assistance. We were unsuccessful, so we want to work with you on that. We ask again, you've heard me before, it's so good to see a baby sitting there. Thank you.
I'm not related to those people.
Sorry about that. We've discussed with you before the need to add on to the federal and state accessible housing code, which does not require an elevator in the second and third floors. That means that people who are in wheelchairs cannot get to the second and third floors. The interesting thing about it is that the International Building Code requires one at the fourth floor. We just can't get to it. And it's an amazing amount of new housing where they have these breezeways of 3 stories, but there's no elevators in them. So we're very disappointed. That for us in the community is a concept called visitability, where we should be able to visit our family members, our friends in their homes as well. Right now, the Americans with Disabilities Act requires that everything outside of an apartment, public place, be physically accessible. That'd be swimming pools, mailboxes, front doors, sidewalks, to the parking lots, to the sidewalks, your sidewalks on the streets. Fair housing requires that you have at least 5% of projects accessible for people with disabilities. I heard a little bit of conversation about this earlier, and I wanted to add on to it, that we need at least 2% of those for individuals who are blind and deaf, so they have technology that's ready for them in case of emergencies, for example. And we're not meeting that. One of the other things that we're asking for is that you do, because of that problem, you do an evaluation of existing housing since the ADA and fair housing went into effect. There hasn't been any guidance in Columbus on that, so we need to evaluate that we might be able to bring up some more accessible housing in those units. It's a possibility to increase there. We would also, because we know that this conversation hasn't gone on before now, is ask the division to train its housing staff on accessible housing, and that includes your developers. I was recently in a conversation with Mr. Richards at the Ohio Department of Commerce, and I was asking him about what his preferences were for training you, municipalities, and developers on how to do fair housing and accessibility for people with disabilities. They strongly suggest HUD has a national program, and I've taken a couple of courses myself. They have a wonderful accessible program. It's free, and they have very distinct and individual programs for each type of housing. This week there was one on accessible bathrooms, for example. Our developers could really use the training. Some of the conversation I heard about, there is some discrepancy about what they're responsible to do. If we required them to get training, then we would get rid of those myths. We also, I want to compliment the directors. I heard a loose number of approximately 10% of the new housing will be accessible. Did I hear that correct?
Ma'am, we want to keep it going.
And what we would like to do is to make that official. We would like that to written into code, that we are requiring 10% of our Columbus's future housing of multiple units for the public to be accessible for people with disabilities. We are not the first ones in Ohio that would require that. Toledo's already doing it. New York, Chicago, and San Diego has already done it. There is San Antonio in Texas as well. And what we're asking is that when we put that in there, that we're very specific about what accessibility means, that there's no misunderstandings. I was at a Ohio task force, Olmsted task force, with a group of professionals trying to improve accessible housing today. And the concern that they had here in Columbus was that they were told that they could not ask to take a look at plans or plans that are about to be approved for accessibility standards. And we would like to develop, for you to develop a process that will allow those plans to be reviewed for accessibility before the city approves them. We think that we could get a better accountability for that. I also heard conversation from other advocates about the need for support services. This is a big concern for people with disabilities. We are really grateful for it. And I personally discussed this with OFA about how the support services aren't really working out. And they're suggesting to attach something to it that has some requirement. For example, OFA is considering of doing 15 minutes per resident with a disability per complex, per apartment project, so that you make sure that you get services and that we do some type of reporting back about the quality outcomes of those services that are provided. It's my understanding that we can ask for that type of reporting, because it is government dollars that we're working with here. The last,
I was just going to ask, because we want to also get this in writing, your presentation, so that we can also follow up.
yes,
yeah,
be happy to,
Yeah.
because I was listening to colleagues and I added some more notes. I'll do some more. You have a copy already on
Oh,
file.
beautiful.
But I'll add more
Thank
documentation
you.
as well.
Thank you.
The last thing that I would like to talk about is about the Healthy Homes Production Program that you created in 2022. You mentioned fair housing, but you did not include accessible housing in that program. And we would like to remind you that healthy homes are also accessible homes.
Well,
Any
thank you
questions?
No, I would say thank you. I think that your advocacy is well received here. I think that I give a lot of kudos and thanks to my colleague, Councilmember White, who has
Yes,
really leaned
He's
in
been a real hero.
and is helping to advise us. I would say that you are correct to lean in as we have the longer conversation in zoning phase 2 around those options. So it's not that you have missed the boat of that conversation, is that we are starting those conversations around what the rest of zoning looks like. So
That would be phase 2 and phase 3.
and phase 3, you're right. You're right. So just stay engaged with us. Continue to give us the kind of information that you sent today. And when we have the seated commission, we look forward to engaging with them. I think that a lot of the advocacy will come from that committee. So thank you.
A couple of them provided comments for today, so they're ready to work.
That's beautiful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any closing comments from my colleagues as we start to think through the work that has been done, but the work that is still ahead?
Yeah, I just want to, this is just a short comment and a reminder to, everyone out there, including members of the community. Deputy Director Prosser did remind us of one thing, which is, the city of Columbus, we don't build any housing. We're not going to be building any housing. We are a facilitator. We incentivize, we enable, but we are dependent on our partners, both in the private sector and the nonprofit sector, and those who are very skilled and very specialized in these different areas. So this will be, as we go forward with what we do with this bond package, as we go forward with what we're going to do with zoning, this will continue to be a partnership, and a lot of collaboration is going to take place because we don't build any housing.
Really good.
We have to rely on others.
It's really good. Thank you so much to my colleagues for being here. Certainly thank you to the Department of Development, both Hannah and Aaron, and to our speakers and our guests for being a part of a very important conversation. I believe this is our community's biggest challenge ahead of us, making sure that we meet the moment in terms of housing. I want to remind us all that when we think about a bond package, it's not just numbers. We talked about numbers today. It's really about neighborhoods. This is a long-term investment in Columbus that is block by block. It's neighborhood by neighborhood. It's about the homes that we live in. And I'm reminded of a story I heard a couple weeks ago from a mom of a young man living in Clintonville. She is proud of the great neighborhood where she has raised her son and the home that she lives in. But what she expressed frustration with me on was for her son. She said that her fear that due to the rising rents and unattainable rental housing, her son may never be able to rent or afford a home in the city of Columbus. At the end of the day, this is what this conversation is all about. Who can live here and who can live here in the years to come? There is one clear message today that there is a lot of work to do. Columbus is growing, and with that growth comes growing needs. So we need to meet this head on by delivering affordable and attainable housing for our future, and accessible housing for our future, for the kids of Columbus, but also for the future workers and future families. And we see this as a historic opportunity, $500 million put forward to help us meet this moment. But we need to preserve existing affordable units, we need to rehabilitate aging housing stock, and we need to construct new homes. This bond package can help Columbus take bold action to confront and ultimately solve our housing crisis. we believe that municipal bonds are one tool to get us there. It's how cities like ours innovate and move progress forward. It is very important as we go into the next phase of the conversation around the bond package that we remind everyone that housing bond is not a tax, or not a new tax. This voted bond package just gives the city permission to invest in this critical infrastructure, including housing. Because of very smart people a long time ago, the city sets aside 25 cents of every dollar that we take in that helps back these bonds, that says that we will have the resources to cover this. And that's when Deputy Director Prosser was saying that we bring down $50 million per year. It's based off of the capacity that we have to pay it back. And so as we have the conversations around what we can get with $500 million of housing, it is critically important that you all help spread the gospel that we're getting this not by raising your taxes, but by giving the city of Columbus the capacity to borrow against lower interest rates and build more housing while we do all the other things that we have to do in terms of infrastructure. So just want to thank you all for being here again tonight, and let's go build some housing. Take care.
I'd also like to remind
Please.
everybody at 4 o'clock tomorrow, there will be an additional hearing of the zoning committee on
Thank you
Zone
so
N
much.
161.
Thank you so much. Tomorrow, 4 p.m., same place. See you here tomorrow. Bye.